The secret that destroyed my father and nearly erased me. What if I told you that blood means nothing when vast sums of money are involved? That your own family, the people who hugged you at Christmas and smiled at your graduation, could meticulously plan your erasure as if it were merely a business strategy? I lived through that. My name was scrubbed from my father's will as if I had simply ceased to exist. My brother, crowned heir to everything. But the truth? Oh, the truth was buried deep. And when I finally unearthed it, I didn't just expose them. I brought their empire crashing down. This isn't merely a tale of betrayal. It's a testament to the quiet wars fought behind closed doors. It speaks of silent vengeance, of bitter inheritance battles, of fraud that stretches across oceans, and of a family so entangled in corruption that even their lawyers eventually needed legal counsel themselves. Yet here's the profound twist. The true weapon wasn't brute power. It was proof. Cold, irrefutable proof. So, allow me to ask you this. What would you do if your own family wrote you out of your legacy? Would you quietly step aside? Or would you be driven to dismantle everything and build something better from the ashes? If you are curious to discover how this unfolds, I assure you, you will not want to miss a single moment of what comes next. Because believe me, this is not just a story, it is a cautionary tale. I recall the precise moment everything inside me shattered. We were all gathered in the lawyer's office, the mahogany walls, the worn leather chairs, and that stifling scent of wealth and finality. Gerald Whitman read the will aloud as if reciting a solemn play, his voice steady, his eyes carefully avoiding mine. To my eldest son, Bradley Morgan, I leave the entirety of the Morgan estate, including all shares in Morgan Holdings. And just like that, everything I had ever worked for, every weekend I sacrificed, every strained holiday dinner where I covered for Dad's questionable decisions, it all went to Bradley. Not a word about me, not a dollar, not even a simple watch. I didn't cry, I didn't raise my voice, but something within me shifted definitively. That kind of betrayal doesn't strike like a sudden blow. It seeps in like a slow-acting poison. I glanced at my brother, his smug little smile, the subtle squeeze of Mom's hand beneath the table. They knew. They all knew. Even Linda, our mother with her steadfast, silent loyalty, didn't flinch. She simply stared straight ahead, as if my non-existence would become reality if she wished it so. That was the moment I realized. This was no mistake. This was a conspiracy, a full calculated orchestration to erase me. And that's when I made a promise, whispered but scorching. You are going to fall, Bradley, and it will be devastating. Growing up, everyone perceived Bradley as the golden boy. Perfect grades, perfect teeth, perfect deceptions, but I knew better. He was no genius. He was a master at leveraging other people's efforts, mine most of the time. Dad often said I had the brains, but Bradley had the charisma. That was his way of saying, you do the work, he gets the credit. I didn't challenge it then. I believed I was playing a long game. It turns out, the only game being played was me. Here is the part that stung the most. I helped build Morgan Holdings. I was the quiet force behind half the mergers, the strategist guiding international expansion, the one who identified loopholes and shored up financial weaknesses before they could capsize us. And all of that was deemed worthless in Richard Morgan's eyes. His true legacy, it seemed, was Bradley, his real son, apparently. The heir? Me? Just the backup plan they simply forgot to update. A week after the will was read, Bradley hosted a party, not a private dinner or a family gathering, a full-blown media event, complete with champagne, camera crews, and a speech that sounded suspiciously like a campaign launch. I am honored to carry my father's vision forward, he declared, pausing for applause. That's when the gravity of it hit me. This wasn't just an inheritance, it was a coup. They were polishing him for public consumption, rebranding him as the brilliant son who would rescue the company. And I was expected to simply vanish, quietly. But I am not the vanishing type. 3 days later, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the safe in my apartment. Not just any safe. Dad's old safe, the one he gave me when I turned 30, filled with papers, dusty keys, and what looked like decades of tax records. He probably assumed I'd never bother going through it. And truthfully, I never cared. Until now. That's where I discovered it. A single yellow folder with one name scribbled in Dad's handwriting, Maddox Holdings. I'd never heard of it. It wasn't part of Morgan Holdings. But something within me, at that very moment, whispered that this was the crack in their armor. I called Monica. She was a brilliant forensic accountant who once worked for a hedge fund that collapsed under a fraud scandal, discreet, fiercely loyal to me. We weren't married, but she was my person, the one who believed in my potential, even when my own father did not. I showed her the file. She blinked twice, flipped through the pages, then looked at me as if she'd just seen a ghost. Caleb, this isn't just offshore. This is illegal. It turned out Maddox Holdings wasn't a company at all. It was a front, a shell used to siphon millions from Morgan Holdings. And guess whose name consistently appeared as the silent beneficiary? Bradley Morgan. That was the first nail in their coffin. And I hadn't even begun hammering. Monica didn't even finish her wine that night. She immediately began digging into financial records, tax loopholes, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Maddox Holdings was a phantom company. No employees, no office. Just a P.O. box and a labyrinthine web of wire transfers that reeked of corruption and financial crimes on an epic scale. I kept thinking, how long had this been going on? And how could Dad have allowed this? But the more we uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't just Bradley being greedy. It was an entire family cover-up. I confronted Mom first. I showed her the documents. She didn't cry. Didn't even blink. She merely said, "Your father did what he thought was best for the company." Best for the company? Falsifying documents and concealing assets. That was when it truly sank in. Linda wasn't merely an unsuspecting bystander. She was a silent partner. Her signature appeared on 2 of the Maddox Wire approvals. This wasn't just betrayal. It was organized betrayal. A lifetime of conspiracy and manipulation disguised as family dinners and holiday cards. A few nights later, I dreamt my father was watching me from across a dark table. Saying nothing, just tapping a pen, a faint smile on his lips. I awoke drenched in sweat, heart pounding, my mind racing. I needed more. Proof alone wasn't enough. I wanted leverage. So I called Gerald Whitman, the family lawyer, the very man who had read my public erasure. I told him I had something he needed to see. He hesitated, but Gerald always kept one foot in ethics and the other in self-preservation. I offered him the foot he'd been keeping out of prison. That changed his tune very quickly. We met at a quiet bar on 53rd Street. I slid the Maddox file across the table. Gerald stared at it as if it might bite. "This is substantial," he muttered, his fingers trembling. "If this goes public," I finished his sentence, "the Morgans go down." He nodded slowly. Then he said the one thing I didn't expect. "There's more." It turned out Dad had a second will, one he never filed, dated 2 months before his death. And in that version, everything went to me. I nearly dropped my drink. Gerald speculated he didn't know why Richard never submitted it. Perhaps cold feet. Perhaps Bradley discovered it and manipulated him into changing it. But that second will, it was real. And it was enough to turn everything on its head. We needed to verify it, file it, and prepare for battle. But if I filed too soon, they'd bury the evidence. If I waited too long, they'd bury me. So I decided on a different course. I would turn their own lies into my most potent weapon. Monica and I began feeding strategic leaks. Nothing overtly dramatic, just subtle hints. A missed transaction here. A peculiar document there. We generated just enough noise. Enough to prompt the board of Morgan Holdings to ask pointed questions. Enough to make Bradley paranoid. And paranoid people inevitably make mistakes. 1 week later, he made his first. A public statement denying any connection to offshore activities. Which was perfect, because we had a video of him in Dubai 5 years prior, toasting with a Maddox Holdings investor. Champagne and all. We weren't merely building a case. We were setting a stage. Every lie they had told was now illuminated by a spotlight. Every move they made, we were 2 steps ahead. I stopped trying to reclaim my family. They weren't mine anymore. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about justice and retribution. Quiet, surgical, devastating. And just when we believed we had control, Monica's phone rang. It was her old contact from the SEC, and he delivered a chilling message. "Bradley's under investigation, and your name just came up." Monica froze. Her hand clutched the phone as if it might explode. "He said your name came up, Caleb," she whispered. "In the investigation, as a potential co-conspirator." That was when the room began to spin. I had been so careful, so methodical. But I hadn't considered, hadn't truly grasped, how deeply I was already entangled in all of this. The money, the documents, the leaks, and worse, the Maddox Holdings paper trail that conspicuously led back to the safe in my apartment. It looked damning. As if I had been part of it all along. As if perhaps I had helped them hide the money before dramatically turning the tables. I wanted to punch something. Instead, I paced. Monica kept offering options, legal defense, whistleblower status, even disappearing for a while. But running was never my nature. Especially not now. "They're turning this on me," I muttered. "They're trying to frame me before I frame them." Because that's precisely what this was. A cold war between brothers. And Bradley, smiling, polished, charming Bradley, was playing dirty. He had power now. He had access. And I was a liability. That night, I did something I swore I would not. I went to the house, the Morgan house. Childhood memories be damned. Linda answered the door in her silk robe, wine in hand, her expression utterly flat. You shouldn't be here, she stated, as if I were a servant who had forgotten the proper entrance. I didn't flinch. I walked directly past her, straight into the study where Bradley was nursing a glass of scotch like some cheap Bond villain. Framing me, I said. Is that your next maneuver? He didn't deny it. He didn't even blink. He simply looked up, smirked, and said, Prove it. That's when I knew. I had to escalate. We needed undeniable evidence, not just documents, not just financial trails, something visceral, something profoundly human. That's when Monica suggested the unthinkable. Wiretapping. She had contacts, people who did these things for individuals like us, people with nothing left to lose. I despised the idea, but I despised Bradley more, so we planted the device in the one place we knew he'd feel completely untouchable, his yacht. He loved to boast there, loved to discuss grand deals with lesser minds over expensive wine and manufactured loyalty. It was the perfect trap, and we were fortunate. 3 days in, he brought a guest on board, some obscure finance figure from Hong Kong with notorious ties to shell companies, and Bradley confessed every single detail. He spoke of the offshore transfers, the payments to Richard Morgan in exchange for cleaning the books, the altered documents. He even admitted the second will existed, but claimed he had taken care of that. My jaw clenched when I heard it. He burned it. He stated it with pride, as if that was his ultimate checkmate. But it was not. Because what Bradley didn't know was that Gerald, the lawyer, had made a copy, just in case. And that copy was now securely in my safe. The recording from the yacht? It was pure gold. No, platinum. Monica spent an entire night meticulously editing it down to its core essentials, names, numbers, dates, and that single chilling line. I took care of that second will. Hearing Bradley utter it, so casually, so utterly arrogantly, was the punchline to a twisted, dark joke. But here's the crucial point about such confessions. They are only powerful when heard by the right people. And I had no intention of wasting this in a mere courtroom. I envisioned a far grander audience, one that encompassed shareholders, executives, board members, and critically the public. So we timed it to coincide with the Morgan Holdings annual gala, the most significant night of the year. Black tie, red carpet, champagne towers reflecting an almost unbearable level of arrogance. Bradley would be center stage, delivering his grand vision speech about expansion, sustainability, all the empty buzzwords he had shamelessly stolen from my own past presentations. And that's precisely when we would strike. I secured a ticket using an alias, dressed like a Wall Street executive, and waited for my cue. Meanwhile, Monica orchestrated everything from a hotel across the street. She was the true puppeteer, with the live stream ready, the projection aligned, and backup files secured on 3 continents. At precisely 9:12 p.m., as Bradley held the microphone and thanked our dedicated investors for believing in the Morgan legacy, the massive screens behind him flickered. For a split second, people assumed it was a technical glitch. But then the audio surged, his voice, the yacht, the undeniable confession. Gasps rippled through the room. One woman dropped her drink. Someone else uttered a stunned curse. And Bradley? He froze. Linda rose from her seat, visibly trembling. Gerald Whitman, lost in the crowd, looked as though he wished to melt into the floorboards. The board members turned to each other, mouths agape. The room wasn't merely shocked. It was electric with revelation. I stepped out from the back, met my brother's gaze, and for the first time in my life, I saw him truly afraid. Not angry, not smug. Afraid. It was a gratifying sight. Security personnel swarmed the stage. Bradley attempted to speak, but the microphone was dead. All eyes turned to me. I required no speech. I simply walked forward, held out a sealed envelope, the copy of the second will, and handed it directly to the chairman of the board. This rightfully belongs to the true heir, I stated, my voice clear and steady. And then, purely for effect, I smiled. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. Because the SEC wasn't the sole entity observing that broadcast. The IRS had just joined the party. The gala video went viral overnight, and not just on obscure finance blogs or corporate LinkedIn. We're talking major news cycles, heated Reddit threads, and countless podcasts. One anchor famously remarked, "It's like Succession had a baby with American greed." I would be dishonest if I said I wasn't a little proud, but pride doesn't guarantee safety when federal agencies start making insistent calls. By sunrise, the SEC had frozen several Morgan Holdings accounts, and the IRS was demanding audits that reached back 15 years. Bradley wasn't just in trouble, he was radioactive. The curious thing? He still attempted to spin the narrative. He held a press conference. He claimed the recording was edited, manipulated, a malicious fabrication. But the internet had already rendered its judgment. Comment sections were brutal. Former employees began stepping forward, emboldened. Anonymous tips poured in from every direction. It turned out many people had simply been waiting for a valid reason to expose the Morgans, and I had provided them the perfect excuse. Justice and vengeance had, unexpectedly, become a collaborative project. But here is where matters became intensely personal once more. Linda, my mother, if I can still truly call her that, appeared at my apartment. Unannounced. No makeup, no wine glass, just her and those weary eyes I once believed in. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't offer an apology. She simply stated, "You destroyed your brother." Not exposed. Not revealed the truth. Destroyed. And that's when the chilling realization struck me. She never loved us equally. Her allegiance was never about right or wrong. It was about control. She viewed Bradley's downfall as her own profound failure. And mine, as the ultimate betrayal. I didn't yell, I didn't defend myself. I simply told her what she needed to hear. I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. I merely turned on the lights. She left without another word. But I could feel it. This wasn't over for her. There is something truly terrifying about a person who genuinely believes they are above justice. And Linda Morgan? She didn't just believe it. She embodied it. A week later, Monica uncovered something else. Not about Bradley, but about Richard, my father. It turned out the Maddox Holdings scandal wasn't even the beginning. Before Bradley, before any offshore accounts, there existed another shell company, older, deeper. And it was intricately linked to real estate deals that led to mass evictions, illegal land seizures, and even political bribes. It made Maddox look like mere pocket change. My father had built an entire dynasty on manipulation, systemic fraud, and relentless falsification. And someone else knew, Gerald. He possessed the documents, hidden, stored, protected like a nuclear secret. So I made another call and arranged another meeting. Gerald was more agitated than usual. He kept glancing nervously at the blinds, as if someone might shoot through them. "This goes far beyond your brother," he whispered, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table. This is what your father truly kept from everyone." I opened it, half expecting another bank statement or offshore report. But no, this was far worse. These were deeds, transaction logs, political donation receipts that made no sense. Until I realized they were meticulously documented bribes. My father had used Morgan Holdings to purchase influence, bury inconvenient investigations, and, unbelievably, steal property from grieving families. One name appeared multiple times: Whitestone Acres, a massive land deal from 2 decades ago. My father had forcibly displaced over 30 families to construct luxury condominiums. An entire neighborhood became a casualty of his ruthless ambition, and the paperwork bore his signature. And Linda's. And Gerald's. I looked up, my eyes burning. "You were involved in this?" He didn't deny it. He simply said, "I was trying to survive him, just like you." The bitter irony? I had spent years despising Bradley for stealing what I believed was mine. But the true monster was Richard Morgan, and my mother actively assisted him. This wasn't just family betrayal, it was generational rot. Corruption that fed on silence, misguided loyalty, and inherited privilege like vultures feasting. And now I possessed all the evidence. Every rotten root, every falsification, every shell company, every illicit payout. All traceable, all explosively damning. And suddenly, I faced a profound choice: incinerate it all, or use it strategically. I chose both. We compiled a comprehensive report. Monica transformed it into a digital bombshell, interactive, precise, complete with footnotes, timelines, and compelling testimonies. Think, the Panama Papers, but intensely personal. We disseminated it to journalists, regulators, and a network of uncompromising lawyers. And within 48 hours, the Morgan name plummeted from legacy to liability. Stock prices tanked. Executives resigned en masse. The board issued a terse statement publicly distancing itself from the Morgan leadership era. It wasn't just Bradley being erased now, it was the entirety of their corrupt enterprise. And that's when Linda retaliated. She filed a motion to block the second will. She claimed I forged it. She even hired a forensic expert who testified the ink didn't match the original. It was a bold move, desperate, but incredibly dangerous, because it dragged every sordid detail into open court, public court. And with public court came intense media scrutiny. And with media pressure came fractures. Bradley, cornered and panicked, tried to cut a deal. He attempted to throw Linda under the bus in exchange for immunity. But here's the unvarnished truth. There is no honor among thieves. And Linda, she recorded his phone call. The recording exploded like a nuclear bomb. Bradley openly begging Linda to take the fall, offering to spin the narrative, so she would appear as the grieving widow swept up in Richard's schemes, promising to take care of her with a slice of offshore money if she kept his name untarnished. The media devoured it. Overnight, the story shifted again, from a shocking family scandal to a full-blown dynasty collapse. The Morgans weren't just corrupt, they were cannibals. And the public? They simply could not tear their eyes away. Linda went utterly silent. Radio silent. No interviews, no public statements, not even her usual vague threats delivered through layers of lawyers. I recognized that silence. It wasn't surrender. It was a calculated strategy. She wasn't finished, not by a long shot. And just as I began to wonder what her next move would be, subpoenas arrived at my door. Apparently, she was suing me for defamation and theft. She claimed I had hacked family files, stolen documents from the safe, and manipulated Gerald into falsifying the second will. Charming, wouldn't you agree? I actually smiled as I read the papers, because the only thing better than knowing the truth is having it unequivocally documented. Gerald, facing his own ruin, flipped, full immunity in exchange for his testimony. Monica and I had every file meticulously backed up. Dates, originals, metadata. I wasn't just ready for court, I was eager for it. They had tried to erase me, to frame me, to utterly destroy me. But now, I was the last Morgan standing who didn't need a lawyer whispering desperate advice in my ear. The trial commenced 2 months later. The media packed the courtroom. Headlines were brutal. Heir versus heir. The fall of the Morgans. An inheritance of shame. Linda walked in like a dethroned queen, cold and composed. Bradley looked like a hollow ghost in an ill-fitting suit. As for me, I didn't wear black. I chose navy, sharp, confident, alive. I was no longer the victim. I was the reckoning. The courtroom felt like a grand, somber theater. Testimonies, exhibits, objections. Every time someone uttered Mr. Morgan, 3 heads turned. But only one held unwavering eye contact with the jury. The turning point arrived on day 6. Monica took the stand, calm, articulate, and utterly devastating. She guided them through every intricate detail. How we discovered Maddox Holdings, the yacht recordings, the systematic real estate fraud. She made them feel it, not just intellectually grasp it. And when she stated, with quiet conviction, they didn't just steal from Caleb, they stole his name, his future, and his father's legacy, the jury remained unflinching. But Linda flinched. Her jaw twitched. Just once. But it was enough. I knew I had her. And I hadn't even called my final witness. My final witness wasn't a person at all. It was a screen. On the last day of the trial, I requested permission to play one final piece of evidence. The judge approved, albeit reluctantly. The courtroom lights dimmed, and the projector clicked on. What appeared was starkly simple. A powerful compilation. Footage of the displaced families from the Whitestone Acres fraud, raw interviews with them, copies of their heartbreaking eviction letters. An old, unhinged voicemail from Richard Morgan cursing out a city inspector. And finally, chilling security camera footage. Linda, laughing, sipping wine at a country club, while in parallel, families packed their meager lives into boxes. No dramatic music, just silence and the undeniable echo of betrayal on a continuous loop. People in the gallery gasped. A few jurors openly teared up. Even the judge leaned forward, visibly affected. And then the screen froze on one final damning quote, spoken by my father during a recorded board meeting. Legacy isn't about truth. It's about control. The impact was undeniable. The verdict arrived swiftly. Bradley was found guilty of financial fraud and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with his assets seized and his public image scorched beyond any hope of repair. Linda narrowly avoided incarceration, but lost absolutely everything. Her board seat, her shares, her once unassailable reputation. And as for me, the court definitively validated the second will. I was officially declared the rightful heir of Morgan Holdings, but I didn't take over the company. I dissolved it. Every single last piece. I meticulously sold off its assets. I ensured former employees received fair compensation. I made significant donations to the very families devastated by the Whitestone scandal. And I ensured Monica earned a prominent place at every table moving forward. She earned it. Without her, I would have been just another erased man, figuratively buried in a silk-lined coffin. She kept me grounded. She constantly reminded me that revenge can be sweet, but true justice is profoundly sacred. The amusing thing. A month later, I received a letter. No name, just a chilling note. This isn't over. There was no doubt in my mind it was from Linda, and that, I realized, is perfectly fine. Let her come. I am ready. And now, allow me to ask you directly. What would you have done in my position? Would you have simply kept your head down, hoping someone else would eventually set things right? Or would you have pursued justice relentlessly, even if it meant dismantling the very people who raised you? Because sometimes the true adversary isn't a stranger. It's the smile at your own dinner table. It's the voice that whispers, "I love you," while simultaneously forging your name on a document designed to erase your very existence. And when an inheritance comes into play, that's often when the masks truly come off and the knives are finally revealed. Have you ever experienced anything like this in your own life? A profound family betrayal, a bitter battle over inheritance, a shocking twist you never anticipated? Share your story in the comments below. I genuinely read every single one. Because narratives like these aren't as rare as we might imagine. They are simply too often hidden from view.
Hi, you are on the Moving Narratives channel. Subscribe and follow our stories.